Okay, thank you. Just quick background as to who I am. I'm an open source researcher, developer, done quite a lot of work in Bluetooth, currently obsessed with RFID, and actually if we've got enough time at the end, we should have enough time. We're going till 6, right? So, and it's only beer afterwards, so, tech or beer, decisions. I'll give you a heads up on something I've been working on since this is about reverse engineering. I've got some nice RFID reverse engineering stuff I've been doing in the last couple of weeks, so I'm going to give you a heads up on that as well. Strongly believe in full disclosure. I do describe myself as a hacker, but I'm a white hat hacker. I'm not the bad guy, I'm just misunderstood, right? Yeah. Completely freelance, so I do weddings, bar mitzvahs, whatever. Yeah. I'm here all week. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about first is satellite hacking. And the reason I'm doing it now, I have actually been doing this for a long time, as you'll see when I get to the slides. A lot of this research is over 10 years old, and I've just recently restarted work on it. And the reason was I saw a video of a talk, I think it was given at Hack in the Box or somewhere, by Jim Giavidi and however you pronounce that other name. And they did a talk called Hacking a Bird in the Sky. And if you Google for it and find the video, it's actually really, really cool. What they did was they actually took over a satellite uplink and figured out how to fix the IP address and stuff, and they ended up sending their own traffic via satellite. And one of the things they said in it at the end of the video was, we're sure lots of people have been doing this kind of stuff for a long time, but they haven't talked about it. And so they kind of put out a call for anyone who'd done any satellite hacking to come forward and talk about it. So I thought, well, hang on a minute, there's all that stuff I did a few years ago. Why don't I dig that out the box and see if it's still applicable, see what's changed, see if I can actually do something new with it. So that got me interested in it again, and I dug it all out and I started playing. And that was about 3 years ago, and I've been promising to make this talk for about 3 years. And people have been saying, what are you up to? Oh, I'm playing with satellites and stuff. It's like, okay, so why the hell has it taken you 3 years to publish something when you already know what you're doing, you've got all the tech, and you've got it all there? Why is it taking so long? Well, the simple answer is when you start pulling stuff off satellites, there's a lot of boobies out there. Okay? So porn, basically, gets in the way. So you think, I'm going to do a night's hacking on satellite stuff, and you start hacking away, and then all this porn starts coming down, and it's just like, it's very distracting. Okay, so that's why it's taken 3 years to do something pretty simple. So, So anyway, we'll get on to the actual content. So basically, what I'm not doing is hacking the actual satellite. So I did start playing with that. Actually, a couple of weeks ago, I had some success with the Iridium satellite, but it suddenly disappeared. I don't know what went wrong. I think. So I'm playing it safe now and just looking at what's coming down from the satellites. But basically, what I'm doing is what's called feed hunting. Anyone here had any experience of feed hunting? You know what I mean by feed hunting? Okay, no one. Good. Virgins, room full of virgins and satellite porn. We're in for a good evening. So feed hunting is basically looking for stuff that's coming off satellite that maybe you're not supposed to find, that's in amongst all the normal traffic that you are expected to find. And the traditional method of doing this is you just you get some kit and you scan all the frequencies. So it's like when you're a kid, I don't know, actually you're probably not old enough, but when I was a kid, you tuned your TV, you would get snow, and it would sit there and you get some snow, and then you get a channel, and you get some snow, and you get a channel. And you could scan through all the frequencies and sometimes you find things in between channels or test channels that weren't published and stuff. And that was a kind of early analog terrestrial feed hunting. So satellite feed hunting is doing the same thing, but you're looking for frequencies on the satellite that aren't necessarily published. Okay? And the way it works at the moment is there's a bunch of people doing this, and they kind of report back to mailing lists. And I felt that's really kind of poking around in the dark. It's very difficult to find anything useful. So you look on these mailing lists, a lot of the information is outdated. You don't know when it was posted. You don't know if the feed still exists. You don't know if the guy got distracted by porn and stopped searching. So, there was more stuff on that same satellite that would have been interesting if only he'd stopped looking at the boobies. So you just never know. And there's a bunch of different sites you can go to that have all this content, and they're telling you about the different feeds that are available, satellites that are available, channels that are available, and so on. And so here's a typical feed hunting site. So I don't know if you can read it at the back there, but basically they're talking about a particular feed that they found. So it tells you what satellite it's on, what frequency it's on, who found it, in this case a guy called Snuffer. And so you can go and tune in and see what's there. Okay. So typically what's there is like some angry boxer or something. So a lot of these channels, what we're looking for is channels that aren't normally there. So when you find a channel that's not normally there, quite often the reason it's called feed hunting is because it's a feed from an outside broadcast. So it might be a wrestling match or the big fight in Vegas or whatever, and they're squirting it over the satellite to the television company, who are then going to rebroadcast it on pay-per-view, for example. So you're getting a free feed from the fight rather than the actual one that the commercial company wants you to get. So I thought this is pants. I'm just spending too much time scanning through channels, getting distracted. There must be an easier way to do this. And if you've seen any of my previous stuff, I'm really into visualizing problems. So what I like to do is take the input data and convert it into some kind of visualization that your brain can get a hold of and do something with. Your brain is designed to process images. Okay, so recognize food, recognize danger, so on, recognize porn. Mine seems to be tuned to that. I don't know why. So I came up with a way of visualizing all the data that was out there. And so this is actually... So anyway, we can dim the lights a bit so that we can see that better. This is the original project. Me and my brother did this back in the 90s. So Ben Laurie, the Apache SSL guy, we had an office with a big steerable satellite dish on the roof. And we connected a PC up to it, and he wrote some software that actually scanned the sky and produced this image. So what you're actually looking at here is the lower axis is the position that we're looking at along the horizon. Okay, so to the left we've got the far west horizon. I'm based in the south of the UK, so I'm looking south, and to the left of the screen, the dish is basically pointing as far west as I can go. Okay, and then far east. I'm back to front, whichever. So what you do is you step the dish like 1 degree, and then you scan all the frequencies. So the x-axis is frequency from 10 gigahertz up to 13 gigahertz. If we see a signal, we draw a red dot. If we don't see a signal, we draw a black dot. Okay. So what you end up with is a nice picture of the sky and the satellites that are in it and all the frequencies that are being broadcast from those satellites. Okay. Now what's really interesting about doing it this way, if I can get a mouse, is some things immediately jump out at you. So as I said, your brain is very good at processing stuff. So you can look at that. If you took that as lists of feeds on websites, that would be hundreds of pages of lists of meaningless descriptions of channels and frequencies and so on. But here you can immediately spot some interesting stuff. Okay? So this big blob here basically means they're transmitting on an awful lot of frequencies. Okay, we're going all the way from whatever it is, about 11 gigahertz, all the way up to 13 gigahertz. And they filled in as much of the space as they can. So there's a lot of channels on that satellite. So that's obviously a commercial satellite. In this case, it's a satellite called Astra. So in the UK, most of the satellite TV comes over this satellite called Astra. Okay. And then next to it, we've got what's probably Intelsat and so on. But as I say, your brain can immediately spot stuff on there. So what I found interesting was I can see something on there that's probably much more interesting than the other stuff instantly. You glance at that, the light's still a bit bad, but see, these big ones, they want to be found. They want it to be easy for somebody with their home dish to point the dish at the sky and receive Sky News, whatever. This guy over here, tiny little red dot, all on his own. Lonely little dot in the sky. Probably quite interesting. Yeah? Doesn't want to be found, very tight beam, not sending much data. No other channels on that satellite at all. So we can see there's a satellite there, but there's only that one little feed there. So probably quite cool. Actually, I think I've enlarged it. There you go. So this is the right-hand corner of that screen. So immediately, can you all see that dot at the back there? Yeah. So immediately you just glance at it and go, wow, okay, there's something interesting I should look at over here. I don't have to scan through all these zillions of channels to find it. Yeah. The other cool thing you can do, we discovered, is time travel. So if you take a picture of the sky and then you take another picture of it a few days later or a few weeks or a few months or whatever, and you compare the two, then again you'll see differences. Okay, so this is a scan we took, and this is the next day, and I'm going to, because again it's a bit hard to see, but if you watch this little cluster here, you see a couple of dots appearing and disappearing. So basically 2 new channels fired up on that satellite. So again, immediately you can spot that. You look at it and go, okay, that's what's interesting. The rest of this is stuff I've seen before. Those 2 dots, I should go and check them out and see what's happening there, because that's new. Okay, and new is interesting. So one of the things we found by doing this was back in, when was it, 2001? When did Princess Diana die? You all remember? So Princess Diana was killed. You probably heard about it. It was a big deal. So I wasn't in Paris, and I can't find that white car I used to have. But anyway, we did this scan around that time. This is the time we were playing with this stuff, and we did this scan, and we saw these 2 new channels had popped up, and so we tuned in our receiver to those 2 channels, and we had a look at what was coming over. And basically, what it was a couple of news teams had gone over to Paris, and they had an outside broadcast unit with them, and they'd fired up a transponder on a satellite, and they were sending a live feed from the camera in the hotel room where they were based. So as breaking news occurred, they could just stand up and do their piece to camera, and they would, always be ready to go. But because it was important, they didn't want to go through the hassle of switching stuff on and off. They got it up and running, they tested it, it was all working. So then they just left it there. And they get used to the fact that, they forget there's a camera in the corner. So you had these guys sort of sitting there drinking coffee and smoking and picking their noses and gossiping. And then every now and then someone's phone would ring and they'd be like, what's going on? Okay, great. And they'd rush out of the room and there'd be nothing. And then they'd come back. And we were getting just the raw, unfiltered news coming into that room, and the journalists dealing with it and putting stuff together in real time as events were unfolding in Paris. And that was really cool. I thought that was really interesting. So that proved the technique worked, that you could actually pull out really interesting stuff. The chances of stumbling across that by just scanning all the channels and looking the whole time are practically nil. It's not going to happen. So back then, this was actually quite hard to do. The systems that they used to control the satellites were fairly proprietary. There were no standards for doing it. Each system had their own way of doing it. They were undocumented. Manufacturers didn't particularly want to tell you how to do it. we ended up having to build our own hardware. We managed to find a satellite reseller who, because we were buying fairly expensive equipment off him, would tell us, how the underlying protocols and stuff worked, and we ended up building little converters that converted his signals to RS-232 so we could then control them from a PC. But it was difficult and it was pricey, and there was a limited amount of data we could get out. So literally all we could get from the signal was signal strength and whether we had a lock or not. Okay? So we would have to use that to create the graphs, but to actually look at the data feed or the video feed, we would just use a traditional satellite receiver. Okay, so things have changed. Now I looked at it again. What we have now is we have open standards. You can actually buy DVB cards that will take a digital satellite feed and straight into your PC, so you get access to the raw data that's coming down off the satellite. Some of the desktop receivers are actually running embedded Linux. So the real breakthrough that I had was I bought, I was looking for what's the coolest desktop satellite receiver to get, and I came across this project called Dreambox. And basically it was an open source Linux-based receiver. It looks like a normal consumer set, and actually most people who buy it will treat it as a normal consumer set. They won't even know they're running Linux under the hood. But this box is running Linux, and it's got an Ethernet port, and you can shell right into it and do stuff. Those are the URLs. So there's an alternative firmware called the Gemini project, which lives at I Have a Dreambox. It's all in German, so unless you can speak German, you're not going to get very far with it. But you can load alternative firmwares to the box, and you can really mess around with it. Okay? So, very cool device. Comes with a web interface, so you can select what... Sorry, say? Okay, so the question was, does the Dreambox come with all the software you need to do the demuxing of the video signal and so on? So the question is, what kind of output do you get from this box? Well, basically, it's like a normal consumer set. So you feed a satellite feed in, and what you get out is composite video or SCART or... I think on the higher models you can get HDMI or whatever. But inside, a lot of it's being done in software. So they are demultiplexing. It's a standard DVB card inside. They're taking the signal and they're processing it through some external programs. I'll get on to some of the tools that are actually on the box a little later on. But basically, you do have access. The raw data is being processed by the Linux box, so you do get access to the box if you shell to the data if you shell into it. And in fact, there's even without going that far, just using the web interface, you can examine quite a lot of what's going on. So this is what the web interface looks like. Gives you just a very simple interface. You choose which satellite you want to look at, which collection of prawn you want to get, so on. But you can also click on a stream. Once you're actually tuned into a channel, you can click on a stream and say, well, give me some details about that stream. And again, I don't know if you can read it at the back, but it gives you the service name. This one's called Ladbrokes Blackjack. Service provider is BSkyB. It'll tell you what crypto it supports. So here we've got Seeker, MediaGuard, via access, a whole bunch of different crypto systems. Tells you which crypto system's being used. This is my favourite word. None, for those that can't read at the moment. Tells you its orbital position, so 284 is 28.4 east. Whole bunch of useful stuff. Okay, so that in itself was quite useful. And in fact, I started writing tools that just extracts the data from that without bothering to go onto the box at all. I started finding things like this one. This is called service name Data01, OpenMux IP Gateway. It's like, ooh. So there's more than just porn on these things. So we've got IP traffic coming over a satellite feed to a consumer box into my office. That's pretty cool. So then I wondered what can you do with that? And again, if you've seen my stuff before, I very often get inspired by Hollywood. I don't know if Johnny Long's here. He did a talk about hacking Hollywood. And, how some of the scenarios are actually a bit over the top, but when you think about it, maybe it actually makes a bit of sense. And a lot of the stuff that I think about doing and I end up doing comes from things like that. You see a scene in a movie and you think, wonder if I could dominate the world by doing that. So,
what is it? It's a bank. It depots cash on Thursday for distribution to all the other branches to cover Friday payroll checks.
Sorry about the terrible sound.
So on Thursdays, the command branch has got a full whack.
On the prowl or strong?
Strong, through the front door.
How many guys?
4 or 3 plus a driver. You walk in, you knock them over, you walk out.
And you want $100,000 advance against a 10% cut for that?
Uh-huh.
Sounds like an address to a cowboy score. They hit the hold-up alarms. I got to get out of there before the cops show. What is that?
They hit 3 hold-up alarm systems. 2 telco and a cellular.
So the clues are
See, but the signals aren't going anywhere because, see, the night before, you cut in and trick out the alarm system computer to turn itself, and the video recorder is off 20 minutes before you walk in the door.
Architectural, electrical engineering plans.
I got it. I got schematics. I got the boards already built that go straight into the CPU.
What's the estimate?
12.1, 12.2 million.
You're on.
Congratulations. And to give you a little idea of back figures, I have a printout here of the cash flow of the bank for the past 2 months.
How do you get this information?
It just comes to you. This stuff just flies through the air. They send this information out. I mean, it's just beamed out all over the fucking place. You all have to do is know how to grab it. Say how to grab it.
This stuff is just beamed out all over the place. So I thought, I wonder if that's true. So, damn it. Open Office. Okay, so then I thought, okay, now we actually need to get a little bit more down and dirty with the data. So what happens to the data on the box itself? If I want to just forget about the web interface and actually get onto the box, do I get access to the raw data? So I came across this thing called DVB Snoop. DVB Snoop is a bit of software that does the demuxing for you, will extract particular chunks of data, so they're all flagged, the data's all multiplexed together and it's flagged as what type it is. And you can then extract different bits of data from it. So you can run it on a PC. Actually, I was hoping to also show you doing this to a hotel TV. But I can't find, I've got a little USB dongle which seems to have vaporized in my travels. So I haven't been able to play with it. But some of the data that's sent between the systems in the hotel over the TV is actually decodable using this thing. So it can be interesting. So this is the kind of stuff, if you actually log into the box and ask DVB Snoop to show you things. So here I'm asking for signal strength, and it's telling me I've got a signal to noise ratio, signal strength of blah, error rate of 0, and I've got signal lock. Okay, so quite useful data. You can also ask it for a bunch of other stuff. So if I pull out a PID scan, so the PIDs are the identifiers for the different streams within the multiplex stream. So this tells you things like, here's our conditional access table, here's the service description table, and so on. So again, you're getting a lot of useful information. You can start looking at actual data blocks that are sent. So in this case, we've got service name, this is history, high definition, data specifier BSkyB, so that's the provider. Yeah. And then you get some more detailed stuff. So when your box when you switch on your satellite box, it gives you a list of all the programming that's coming for the next whatever, day, week, month. And all of that description is sent as a constant stream, and you can actually just pull that off and read it yourself. Okay, so it's interesting stuff, and it's what you're supposed to see, but it becomes quite important later on when we want to improve the process of feed hunting. We can actually use this to categorize what we're seeing. Okay, so the normal feeds are telling us exactly what they are. This is the name of the channel, this is the provider, this is what it is. So again, you can use that to filter out the uninteresting from the interesting. Yeah. And if you just do a simple grep on the service name, you get a whole list of all the different channels that are coming down on this particular transponder. This is when it gets really interesting. So I found this PID type called a DSM-CC private data section, DVB datagram. So a DVB datagram is an IP datagram encapsulated over DVB. So we're actually seeing IP traffic in amongst the video and audio stream on this particular transponder. Okay. And sure enough, within the datagrams, we've got MAC addresses, and it's a normal MAC address. So this is obviously addressed at a particular IP device. And in fact, we have an IP address down here. So source address and destination address. Yeah. So here's an actual UDP packet being sent via satellite, okay, which we can just intercept on our consumer box sitting at home, plugged into my Sky receiver. My favourite word again, unscrambled. So they're sending some kind of software update. This is a recommended update that's going to something. I don't know what. Okay, so then the goal was to actually just take over the Dreambox and start doing this stuff automatically. So instead of manually having to go to a web page and look at particular feeds and mess around with it and make decisions based on what I was seeing, I wanted to write a bunch of tools that would do that for me via the web interface. It actually turned out that the web interface is fairly limited. Okay, there's some restrictions on what you can do, and one of the biggest restrictions actually is it will only steer to a dish or to an orbit and a frequency that it knows about, that it's been particularly configured to know about. So you can't just send it a URL that says steer to this position and this frequency and this polarity, which would be great if you could, because then you could just scan. I think you can do it with some of the lower level tools on the box, but I haven't actually dug deep enough to find them yet. So I sort of half abandoned the doing it purely via the web interface, and I've done a kind of mishmash. So what I actually do is I create config files that I send to the box, and then I restart it so it knows about the chunk of sky I want to look at, and then I use the web interface to control it. Yeah. So this is how it looks normally. So here we've got Astra 19.2 East and the list of channels on that satellite. Once I've reconfigured it, all it knows about is orbit. So this is just 1 degree of orbit, and then all the frequencies I want to look at within that orbit. So I don't care what channel may or may not be there. I'm just saying steer to this position and do all of these frequencies. Yeah. So I'm a Python fan. I do everything in Python. Python rules. Grab the URL, read the status. And what I'm doing now is, instead of creating that flat image that we had before, I'm actually creating a 3D model of the sky. And this is what it looks like. So, again, it's a bit hard to read, but you've got frequencies down the side, you've got orbit here, and then this is similar to the graphic that I had before, which is I draw a dot if I see a signal, but now the color of the dot represents the strength of the signal. So the red stuff is I'm seeing something, but I'm not getting a good signal-to-noise ratio. The green stuff is this is the sweet spot. If you want to actually tune in, go here. Yeah. So basically, I've scanned the sky, gone along these orbital positions, and I found this chunk of data that I can go and look at. Okay. So the 3D model is point and click. Once you've created objects, you can actually click at them, and it will then steer the dish to that particular position, tune into that frequency, and start giving you the good stuff. Yeah. The ultimate goal is to actually have a little floating window within the 3D model that shows you what's coming down the stream. And if there's any Python programmers who know how to inject video streams into a Python 3D visual object, please come and talk to me. But right now I haven't figured it out. Yeah. And the other thing it can do is set up automatically a pipe, so it's piping the data. If it sees a datagram, it'll pipe it straight to a ton tap interface, so I can whack it straight into Wireshark. Yeah. So I'm going to give you a quick demonstration, hopefully, if the demo gods are with me today. Let's see. Great. So I've already set up a tunnel to my box. Let's see if I can make that a bit bigger. Is that readable? Okay, so before I do this, there's no law enforcement in the room, are there? No? Excellent. I was thinking about the jurisdiction. Who would have jurisdiction here? So I'm in the US giving a talk. I'm tunnelled into a receiver in the south of the UK, which is doing something to a satellite which is in space above Africa. Okay, so bring it on. Okay. Cross-jurisdictional? I don't think so. Men in Black, yeah, they could just whack me, of course, that would be easier. Okay, so as I say, if the demo gods are with me, I'll show you, because we've got bags of time, I'll show you the whole thing, how it works from beginning to end. So we're going to have a look at a satellite called Hotbird. And basically, I've written some Python scripts, as I said, which I will publish. I haven't published them yet just because they're ugly and I'm embarrassed to publish them. But the first thing you do is you tell it the start frequency, end frequency, step, orbital position, start orbital, end orbital, and step. And then if you want it to spit out the config files, you either give it an XML flag or a config flag, and it will give you back, hopefully. So this is just the raw config file that ends up telling the Dreambox what satellites it knows about. Okay. Similarly, if I say the same thing with config, it'll spit out a raw config file, which is one of the files sitting on the file system of the Dreambox. Okay. So if I do that, chuck it into a temporary file, do that, chuck that into a temporary file, send it across to my box. So I'm just secure copying the files across to my box on the south coast of the UK. And it's now just restarted the process, hopefully. So if I do a PS on the Dreambox, I can see a bunch of processes running, and the one we're looking for is Enigma. Okay, so Enigma is the process that actually controls the video feed. And it seems to respawn a number of times before it actually settles down. And for some reason, it always settles down on that process ID. Okay. So it's now settled. So it's restarted and it's running that setup. So if I now tell it, okay, build me my 3D model with those configuration parameters that I gave you. The light is really not great in here. Is there any way we can dim that a little bit more, maybe? So if only you could see it, the cool thing about this model is you can actually, it's a 3D model, you can move around. Excellent. So I feel like I'm back in my evil lair now. So what we're doing now is scanning the frequencies and it's drawing the dots. I'm drawing a really small section here because otherwise it will just take too long. But normally what I would do is scan a much bigger, a number of satellites and a number of frequencies and have a great big playground to play in. But this is just going to do three orbits. So one of the things I do as well is I show the signal strength on the back. So if I want to see how good that, you can just about see it there. What's coming is, as I process the data, it will actually give you on the back of the feed, or it will change the shape or the color. I haven't quite decided yet, but as I understand what that feed is, because it's a 3D model and I've got lots of room to put stuff in, I'll use shape probably to determine that, okay, that's a data feed rather than a video feed. And I can throw a bunch of stuff on the back coming out here to actually tell you what it is. So, Star Wars style, disappearing off into the distance. So, okay, so we're on the last pass now. So we found a little blob. So this is a transponder that's nice and nice clean signal. Yeah. So it takes a few hours normally to do a decent chunk of the sky if I'm doing it. But as I say, I've just narrowed this down for the talk. Nice. Okay, so the demo gods have broken me. What have I done? Let's just see if it's still thinking. So normally what you would do is click on one of these objects, but I have broken it. Okay, nothing like fixing your demo in mid-talk, right? What have I done? Okay, so I'll cheat. So normally you click on this, it would actually steer the dish to the right frequency and so on. But what I'm going to do is find one of the ones that had a lock and just manually get it. Okay, so that's what's going on under the hood. So basically it's doing a get of the URL, and that will have steered the dish to the right place and so on. So if I now go onto my box, what I should be able to do is DVB snoop. Damn it. I love it when a plan doesn't come together. Okay. So for the last 2 days I've been doing this in my room upstairs and it's been working perfectly. There we go. Okay, so I'm actually starting to see some data now. So if I do a PID scan of PID 17, yeah. So here we have the raw data coming off the satellite for that particular frequency and channel. Okay, so we can see stuff I showed you in the slides, service description, blah, blah, blah. If I go back to the PID scan, and just have a look at all the PIDs that are coming off there. Can be a bit slow because they're not always sent all the time. Okay, so it's just every now and then. But remember, what we're looking for is the datagram. So if I grep for data, and then we wait a little bit, we should hopefully see a data feed. To be honest, a lot of my stuff, I really don't understand what the hell I'm doing. I'm just kind of poking around. So you start asking me about satellite frequencies and stuff. Okay, so the limiting factor on my dish was the size of the hatch in my roof to get it up onto the roof. So I originally bought a 2-meter dish, and then my family just pissed themselves laughing watching me trying to get this thing up through it's like, you're such a geek, Dad. You're pathetic. So I had to take it back and get a 1.2 meter dish. So it's a 1.2 meter dish, whatever that tells you. Yeah.
What stuff do you actually have to control the dish?
I have a slide at the end that gives you the full details, but it's cheap. Yeah. So. So we found this DVB datagram, private data section, okay? So wouldn't it be nice if we could just create an Ethernet interface from that? That would be really cool. So actually you can. So if I look at ifconfig, basically I've got ETH0 and loopback. But if I run dvbnet and give it the PID number, so it's created a virtual Ethernet device which is linked to the demuxer for that PID. Okay. So if I now do an ifconfig -a, I have a new device, DVB00. Okay. If I bring that up, okay, we're already receiving traffic. So basically that's now running live, capturing data off the satellite, demuxing it, converting the datagrams and feeding them onto the IP stack. Okay. So we should be able to do something like TCP dump. And there we have raw traffic from the south of the UK via the African satellite. I'm sorry? Yeah. Actually, you can configure your local routes so that it gets routed to an external box. So what I could do is forward that back over the SSH tunnel to this box and then run it through Wireshark or create a TUN-TAP interface and pipe it straight into an interface on this box. So there we have raw data from Africa somewhere. So. Thank you. So I thought that was kind of cool. I can't show you what's in those packets because that would be naughty, apparently. So, in the well, you can't with this setup because it's purely a receiver, but there's no reason you couldn't just get a very low power transmitter and point it at somebody's satellite dish and just man in the middle there feed, or even take it over and feed them something other than. So I could combine my hobbies. I could get the prawn coming down one side and squirt it into the. So yeah, you could. I mean, there have been people who've taken over the satellite feeds and actually broadcasted back to the satellite. I think most satellites work in a mode, and again, someone who knows more about this will probably correct me, but basically what you send up gets sent back down again. So if you can actually beam something up to the dish, it will come back down to everyone who's listening. So, where were we? Okay, so these were the slides in case it didn't work. Okay, so that's the equipment list. So I used a box called the Dreambox 7020, which is a $350 receiver. The dish, 50 to 200, so the 2 meter one I couldn't get through the hatch was 200 pounds. Took it back and swapped it for a 50 pound one. The motor and the mount was 100 pounds, so total layout was 550 quid. Or 785 of your Earth dollars. Yeah. So yeah, really cheap. Really cheap. Any more questions? I know I've got bags of time, but I'm going to do the RFID stuff as well. So. Yes?
So how naughty is naughty exactly? Since
How?
I'm sending this data to you, like what, just can you give me a 10-second overview of how many different organizations are going to throw you in jail if you didn't go through that?
Okay, how naughty is naughty, and how upset would they be if I intercepted their packets? I think, again, it probably depends on your jurisdiction. In the UK, we have a thing called the Telecommunications Act, which basically says if you intercept or receive a signal that's not intended for you, then you're naughty. Okay? So, trouble with this stuff is you don't know if it's intended for you until after you've looked at it. Because... I mean, the stuff is broadcast. Chances are it was intended for me, right? They were thinking about me when they broadcast this stuff. So my view is it probably was intended for me, but, I'd better be a little bit cautious about looking at it. Particularly those ones with the really tight little beams off to the side. Those guys get upset. And they have hardware that you don't want to get upset. So, yeah. With cryptid signals. We're back to porn again, aren't we, basically? So obviously the main motivation for satellite hacking is normally free porn, okay? And a lot of it has been cracked. Actually, it's very interesting with the Dreambox, the access cards. I don't know how stuff works over here, but in the UK, most of the satellite services, you get given a smart card, and the smart card has a key on it, and it can do a crypto verification or decode of a key. So they broadcast an encrypted key over the net, over the satellite. Your receiver receives it, and then it asks the smart card to decrypt it, and then it can use that to decrypt the scrambled feed, and then you can see it. Okay. On these Linux boxes, the smart card hardware is abstracted from the receiver hardware. Okay. So what you've got is a virtual access module that has either smart cards or possibly an Ethernet connection through a tunnel to someone else's smart card. So there are these card sharing schemes where as long as one person in the pool has a card that can decrypt that code, you can share the decrypted key with everyone else in the pool and you can watch your free porn. Yeah? For that reason, I haven't bothered playing with encrypted signals because it's already been done. The one that did interest me, and I did actually make a start on, and then somebody else cracked it, so I gave up, was the pay-per-view. A lot of the channels on terrestrial digital broadcasting, what you can do is you can do a one-time pass. So it will flash, it basically sends a little applet to your set-top box that runs a little dialogue that says, call this premium rate number and quote 1234, and they'll give you the unlock code. Yeah. So every time that applet runs, it's a different code. So you can't just brute force it and get all 9,999 possible responses. So what I wanted to do was actually load it into a VM and emulate the set-top box and just restart it so that it was the same random numbers each time, so you could actually then brute force it and just go through every possible. And I thought that would have been a really easy and elegant solution, but just as I started work on it, somebody announced that they'd cracked the crypto, and they could actually, you can just type in the number on their website and it tells you the unlock code. So I didn't bother. Any other questions? Excellent. Okay. Well, as I said, I'd like to give you a heads up on some RFID stuff that I've been doing since this is reverse engineering. We've got half an hour, right? Bags of time. Okay, so I publish an open source library called RF Idiot, which is basically... sorry, if anyone is not interested in RFID and wants to leave now, I won't be offended. I'll give you a minute to get out without disturbing everyone. But, no? Excellent. Okay. So yeah, I publish RF Idiot, which is on rfidiot.org, and it's an open source library for playing with RFID. And I recently was flagged. Oh, well, let's start at the beginning. Let's just show you an RFID application quickly. Okay, so we need, I'm just going to show you quickly something that runs on RFID. Normally I take my son's passport with me wherever I go, because the new chipped passports are quite a good demonstration. But when I started doing this, he was still at school. He's now just left school. He plays rugby for the local team. He's about to join the Royal Marines. So I don't dare steal his passport anymore because he'll kill me. So, luckily I have a clone of his passport there. So, here's one I made earlier. Okay, so for those of you not familiar, the way you read a digital passport is you hand it to the guy at the counter and they scan it through a thing called an MRZ reader. And the MRZ reader reads the machine-readable zone, which is the two lines at the bottom of the passport. And the passport is super securely encrypted with a super secret password that's printed on the bottom line of the passport. Okay. So it derives the key from that and uses that to read it. So I'm going to just quickly read. So I've logged into the passport, I'm reading it. So you can see his details have come up, name, date of birth, all of that stuff. Yeah, so I'm hoping when they try and send him to Afghanistan, he's not going to get past the border. But, so yeah, this is my slightly modified clone of his passport. Okay, so the library tries to support as many different readers as possible. And a couple of weeks ago, a guy flagged on a mailing list I'm on that there's this company called TikiTag. Has anyone heard of TikiTag? Yeah? A couple of you. Okay. So TikiTag, they've invented the Internet of Things. Okay. So apparently the Internet of Things is a sticker and a reader. And the way it works is you stick the sticker on an object, and then when you hold that object near the reader, some action occurs. So say I stick the sticker on my wallet. When I hold my wallet up to the reader, up pops Microsoft Money or whatever, something, whatever you want. So anyway, somebody flagged this to me and said, look, they're rebranding TikiTag. So the guys that own it, I think it's Alcatel-Lucent, they got the brand name wrong and they're going to have to change it. So for a short period, there's a 70% discount code. You can go to the website, buy a starter kit, which is one of these readers, plus 10 tags for like $15. Okay. these are normally $50, okay? And in the UK, the cheapest equivalent is about £65. So being a sucker, I ran out and bought a couple. And I thought, okay, that's cool. Let's see if I can implement that. So I added support for that into RF Idiot. So it actually comes up, when you plug it in, it comes up as an ACS, ACR, blah, blah, blah. So I went to the ACS website and I downloaded their manuals. And from their manuals, I could implement support for the reader. So, for example, I can just look at this tag. So reader number 3. Okay, so tells me I'm using this reader, firmware revision, serial number. This is the ID of the tag, and it's a MyFair ultralight. Okay, so that was quite cool. I then wanted to do something more complicated, like get it to read the passports. And at that point, the documentation it was hideous. I mean, the ACS documentation, they had taken someone else's documentation and basically cut and pasted a bunch of hex and sort of, this is what you do if you need to do this, but they didn't explain what all the hex was about, okay, what all the different bits of the commands were. So I was working with Zach. Zach's the operations director of DEF CON, and we do quite a lot of work together, and he's like chip monkey and I'm code monkey, okay. And so the first thing he does when he gets a bit of hardware is he takes it to bits. So he took it to bits and he's got it under a microscope and he's like, well, look, it's got this NXP chip on it. Why don't you go to the NXP website and download their documentation and see if it's any better than the ACS crap? So I went to the website and all the documentation's restricted. So you can't just download it. You have to fill in a form and send off for it, okay. So I downloaded the form, I filled it in, I sent it off. I get an email back from the guy at NXP saying, okay, so you're interested in the PN532. Which aspect of that are you interested in? The reading element or the emulator? Ooh. Emulator. Oh, yeah, obviously the emulator. That's what I was looking at, yes, the emulator. So yeah, turns out the chip that's in the new NFC phones is the PN532. So not only can it act as a reader, but it can actually pretend to be a chip. Right? So I wrote a little script called ACS emulate. Now, I'm under NDA. I cannot publish this stuff yet. So this is a heads up. I'm hoping I can. I've talked to NXP about this, and I've given an argument why I should be allowed to publish their restricted documents. But so I can't tell you what all these numbers mean, but if I just type this in, it will fire up in emulation mode, okay? I think they will. I think they should let me publish. There's no reason not to, really. So I need to tell it which reader it is. Okay, so we fired the reader up now in emulation mode. So if I go to my other reader, and I do an ISO So I'm going to use my OmniKey Cardman as a reader. So as soon as this goes into the field, it will activate the emulator. Okay, so on this window, it's noticed it's been fired up. It's set a UID, so 08 DC4420. And actually that 08 is one of the reasons I think they should allow me to publish this. On a RFID UID, 08 means this UID is not a fixed ID, it's a pseudo-random ID. Okay, so you couldn't use this to spoof a genuine ID, a UID. So you couldn't clone someone's card by using this technique because the first two digits would be wrong. Yeah. Unless, of course, you're a passport, which use pseudo-random UIDs. Oh. So, but anyway, so if I now read it with a normal reader, the normal reader thinks it's just seen a smart card with that UID, which I set over here, remember, DC4420. That's my DC4420. Gives the ATR and all the other stuff. So that's the ATR I send back to identify myself as I'm pretending to be a smart card. Okay. So we got it working. So the reader is now pretending to be a tag. The only other device that I've got that can do that cost €500 and took about 6 weeks to arrive. This cost me $15 and took 2 days to arrive, and they sell them on ThinkGeek. So then I thought, okay, if I can read stuff with this reader and I can emulate with this reader, what happens if I put two of them together and I have a reader and an emulator and stuff happens? So plug in another one. So what we have now is so I wrote a program called ACS MITM, ACS Man in the Middle. So what ACS Man in the Middle does is it fires up an emulator on one reader and a reader on the other, and it will then relay anything that the emulator sees coming from the genuine reader to the card on the reader. It all gets very confusing now. Okay. So anyway, it's bouncing stuff backwards and forwards. So imagine that instead of this being my reader running my passport application, this is a reader at the border control. Yeah. So it's an automated machine, or it's a reader with a cashless pay system, or it's a transport system reader, whatever. So that's sitting there somewhere in the public domain. So I fire up my my emulator. So I'm going to say use reader number 3 as the reader and number 4 as the emulator. Okay, so it's now fired up. One of these is flashing away like mad because it's waiting for a source tag. Okay, so if I give it that. Yeah, I'm in demo hell today. Okay, so it's found a source tag. It's configured itself. So the emulator has now fired up and configured itself to be the same mode as the source tag. Okay, so if I now put the emulator on the passport reader. Okay, now, okay, this is good. So I'm getting, this is a low-level CRC error. So this reader is broken, but I can't go back to TikiTag and say, you know that feature that your device isn't supposed to be able to do? Well, it's broken. Can you swap it, please? No. So I can just swap them around. It seems to work fine as a reader, but not as an emulator. So if I just swap those around. Okay, so I'm now sitting there waiting for a command to come from the external reader, which I can then relay to the card. So if I run my application again, so again, remember, we're not... So this is an external application. This is just whatever that reader happens to be doing. In our case, I have to run something to show you it working, but this is actually the passport reader at the airport. Okay. So what's happening is, as each command comes into the emulator, I'm logging it, and I'm also sending it to the card. And then the card is replying, and I'm logging that and sending it back to the emulator. So the emulator, the external reader, can't tell the difference. As far as it knows, it's talking to the actual card. Yeah? So we've now got a man in the middle, RFID man in the middle, for $30. How cool is that? or $100 when the rebranding's occurred, and but still pretty cheap. And you're still not getting in, Mr. Bin Laden. So yeah, that was the heads up. I hope I can publish it. I'm waiting for go ahead from NXP. As I say, some of the stuff is under NDA, but this, it's well known that the chip can do this. So I don't see why you shouldn't know how to do it. Yeah, it's open source. Information wants to be free. Yeah.
Now you said that in the emulation mode, it's always going to start with the number 08 designating pseudo-random.
Yeah. The reason that the UID, the unique ID, starts with a 08 is specifically to stop you being able to use this technique to clone genuine cards. As it happens, the 08 is also used in passports to stop you being able to track individuals just by activating their RFID chip. So in the case of a passport, it is actually a completely accurate emulation. The ID number will be the same as the ID number that came across from the passport when I selected it. But in that case, it doesn't matter because the UID isn't used for any of the security elements. If it was used, say like in MyFair on London Transport, the unique ID is used to help create the unique crypto key for that card. So they use diversified keys, so every single card has its own crypto key that's based on the unique ID. Because I can't emulate that unique ID, I cannot clone a MyFair card with this technique. So, does that answer that? Yeah.
So basically you're saying the transport system has better security than the passport system?
Transport system has better security than the passport system? No, not at all. They're running MyFair, which is thoroughly broken. No, the passport system uses a completely different technique. They use, it is pretty broken. They use DES with a crypto key that's printed on the passport that is derived from publicly available knowledge. It's basically the passport number, your date of birth, and the expiry date of the passport. You glue those three items together, that's your 3-DES key. But they do have certificates. So that image is signed with a certificate. So all the data stored in the passport is signed with a certificate. So you can check, in theory, you can check the validity. The only problem is you've been given the data you're going to check and the thing you're going to check it against by the same thing. Yeah? So can anyone spot the deliberate mistake there? So here is one that should be signed by the UK Passport Authority. It was actually signed by Dave's Wetterburgers. And Dave himself signed it, so it's come from the highest authority. So if you can't check the validity of the certificate, then you can't check anything. But that's okay, because we have a thing called the PKD. PKD is the Public Key Directory, which is a list of all the valid certificates. 50-odd countries are issuing these passports. 5 of them have signed up to the PKD. UK ain't one of them. So, the passport system can be secure, but in its current implementation, it's not, in my opinion, my humble opinion. Location and code. I will, if you keep an eye on rfidiot.org, and I always announce on Bug Track and Full Disclosure. Hopefully next week sometime I'll be able to publish. Any other questions? Excellent. Well, go drink beer. Oh, sorry, DT.
Because the latency is, how much latency can you introduce between the emulator and the reader before there's a timeout issue? So how far can you follow behind some guy's pocket in Kabul and transmit it to his home back in London?
Right. So how much latency will the systems tolerate between the emulator and the reader? I haven't tested it. I mean, the whole session from the emulator end doesn't break down for about 2 minutes. So if I stop it mid-transaction and just let it sit there, eventually the chip will time out, but it's like 2 minutes later. I guess how long the other end will take depends on the local implementation, but this is version 1. Version 2 will definitely have a socket, so you can run the reader on one machine and the emulator on the other and pipe over them.
The other day, you could probably use your phone as a router, route the reader over to some other guy with a phone and transmitter.
Absolutely, yes, yeah. So,
Fall behind the person and start the transmitter.
yeah, I mean, as soon as I release this, I intend to do an experiment with somebody maybe in the US and someone in the UK and see if we can actually do like a Visa transaction from a laptop in a shop in the US talking to a Visa card in my office in London. So that would be quite cool. Or even a Visa card in someone's pocket who happens to be walking past on the street. Okay, if that's it, yeah. Drink beer. Beer wants to be free.